as it was specified in the Windows end user license agreement.
Yeah, it's important to remember that in the license itself it says that you can receive a refund if you don't use the software, and that the manufacturer is bound by law to do this, or at least bound by contract. And we found that, you know, if you called up these manufacturers, they basically said, "It's stop bothering me, kid," and hung up on you. We didn't really want to sort of give out the location of where we were going to meet until, you know, at the very last second. So what we did is we had people meet at places that we could control in the different towns around here. So I was the San Jose marshal, and I believe, Nick, you were the San Francisco?
Rick Moen and I did San Francisco.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we had maps there, and we handed them off to everybody who was coming.
Well, we actually met at a Denny's that's just outside the Foster City limits, Foster City city limits, which meant also that it was just outside the Foster City police jurisdiction, which meant that any incidents that happened at the meeting point happened in the jurisdiction of San Mateo, and if they told us to get lost, we'd say, fine, we're going to Foster City, bye.
It's sort of the Dukes of Hazzard method of avoiding the cops, so.
Well, actually, we marched on the other side of this building. We marched around and up onto the parking structure that's up there. And that's where Microsoft had a reception laid out for us with drinks and a big sign that said, you know, Microsoft welcomes the open source community. And the local news cameras got shots of Eric Raymond and the Microsoft representative. The Microsoft story seemed to mostly be that this was not an issue for Microsoft, but rather from the OEMs. So we all needed to go back to our computer manufacturers and try yet again to try and get a refund from them. We responded to them saying, you know, we've tried that, it's not possible, we need Microsoft to take action at this point. And they just repeated the tagline over and over again. You need to go to the OEMs, the manufacturers, and get your refunds there.
We had about 150 people, probably about half of which had signs and such, so.
Well, we ended up actually right in this courtyard here. Basically, we originally gathered outside. Various people sent groups in. People from the FreeBSD camp sent a couple folks in. We had Eric Raymond and Chris actually tried to go up eventually. And,
yeah, they had blocked the elevators off to us.
Where were their offices?
Their offices are right up here on the 9th floor. We got some really nice press out of it. And we think as a result, Toshiba made it possible for you to buy laptops without the operating system on it. So it's a small victory, but, well,
and even now, companies such as IBM and a lot of other computer manufacturers are allowing you now to buy machines that don't have Windows on them.
You know, when I was a kid and I went to school, the teachers were trying to teach us to share. They said if you bring some candy, you can't eat it all yourself, you've got to share it with the other kids. But now the administration says teachers should be teaching kids to say yes to licensing. If you bring some software to school, oh no, don't share it. Sharing means you're a pirate. Sharing means you'll be put in jail. That's not the way society should work. We need the goodwill, the willingness to help other people, at least when it's not too hard, because that's the basis of society. That's the fundamental resource that gives us a society instead of a dog-eat-dog jungle.
So what about people that say that if you have rampant piracy, it will eliminate the profit motive, and then in the creative works software will not be?
Well, they're wrong on both counts. For one thing, people are making a profit from developing free software, but for another, the freedom to have a community is more important.
People that casually look at open source free software and think, well, because you're supposed to share and do it for people's goodwill, does that seem somewhat communist? What's your response?
Absolute nonsense. It makes me really angry when people do that.
Well, back in 1989, actually, communism would have been a compliment. The word that people were using at that time was crazy. I wanted them to use capitalism.
Communism is an ideology that forces people to share. If you don't share, you get thrown in jail or killed.
In 1990, we got a visit from a director of an institute in Moscow University. And actually, I saw him in Helsinki just 2 weeks ago. But in any event, he came by, and Richard Stallman had suggested that he visit Cygnus because he was interested in understanding how the free software model might apply to stimulating entrepreneurial innovation in Russia, of all places. And we had been kind of secretive about our business plan because we weren't really sure that it was going to work, and we didn't want to look too stupid if it failed. But I was very, very open with him, and the more I told him, the more he started shaking his head like this. And I finally said, what's wrong? And he said, this sounds too much like communism to be successful in Russia.
You go to a gulag and end up in a mass grave with a bullet in the back of your head. Open source is not communism because it doesn't force people.
Karl Marx did not invent helping your neighbor. It's not communist to have a commons. A commons existed long before communism as a philosophy of government. There are many commons in our lives. For example, we drive on the highway, something that is maintained for our common good.
Actually, labeling our business model means that it misses the point a little bit. Whether it's communist or whether it's capitalist, the label doesn't matter. The real question is, how much value can you deliver? How scalable is the business? What kind of problems, what kind of rate of innovation can you sustain? And then however you want to label that is really up to you.
A lot of people described that August Linux World as Linux's coming out party. Linus Torvalds was very funny about that. He said, what, was Linux gay? But some people said, yeah, that was our debutante ball. That was when the Linux guys, the hardcore hackers, really got it together with the suits.
At 3 p.m. on August 10th, 1999, Linus Torvalds delivered the keynote address at Linux World. The crowd of 6,000 people began lining up at 12 noon.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Larry Augustine, Linux World Conference Chair and President and CEO of VA Linux Systems.
These guys have to clap. I pay them. Thank you all for being here. It looks like it's been a great show so far. If you'll indulge me for a moment, I'm going to try and avoid the glare of the lights and just I still think there's a lot of people, even though this is the second show, I still think there's a lot of people who don't quite get what it is that's so exciting about Linux. There's this great show going on next door, there's huge exhibits and everything, but it's the people out here that are the real contributors, not those companies. The person on next, I know you all know, so I don't have to give anything in the way of introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Linus Torvalds. Linus.
Calm down. Calm down. Say, yes. I don't want to just give one of my normal talks because I find them boring. Probably by now most of you find them boring too because you've heard them like 10 times. But after the technical update, we'll actually try whether we can do a questions and answers session with 5,000 people or how many of you there are there. And it may not actually work out because one of the 5,000 people is really loud. The one thing I will do, which I always do in all my talks, is the gratitude thing. I want to kind of acknowledge the fact that I've obviously not been alone in doing Linux.
Red Hat, up 228%. This is the IPO that everybody was waiting for. They, of course, are behind the Linux operating software.
RHAT. I know.